Before we begin this sacred journey through the ancient stones of Jerusalem, I invite you to become part of our community. If stories that touch the soul and capture the profound moments of human devotion resonate with you, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell. What you're about to experience is more than a video. It's a window into one of humanity's most powerful expressions of faith, and by subscribing, you ensure you won't miss future journeys to the world's most spiritually significant places. The sun has not yet broken fully over the Mount of Olives when the first whispers of movement begin in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem's Old City. It is a Tuesday morning in October, and something extraordinary is unfolding in these ancient alleyways that have witnessed the footsteps of prophets, kings, and countless pilgrims across millennia. The limestone buildings, weathered to a golden hue by centuries of sun and prayer, seem to hold their breath in anticipation. Through the narrow passageways that wind between structures built upon structures, each layer telling its own chapter of this city's 4,000-year story, a procession is gathering. The Western Wall, known to Jews simply as the Kotel, stands as it has for more than 2,000 years, a massive retaining wall built by Herod the Great around 19 BCE to support the expanded Temple Mount platform. Its enormous limestone blocks, some weighing as much as 300 tons, rise 62 feet above the plaza, with another 17 courses buried beneath centuries of accumulated earth and history. But this morning, the wall represents something far beyond its physical dimensions. It is the closest place to the Holy of Holies where Jewish prayer is permitted, the most sacred accessible site in Judaism, and today it will serve as the destination for a procession that carries the weight of memory, devotion, and an unbroken covenant that stretches back to the patriarch Abraham himself. The streets of the Jewish quarter are awakening differently today. Shopkeepers who normally would be arranging their displays of olive wood carvings and silver Judaica instead stand in their doorways, watching and waiting. The usual morning sounds, the scrape of metal shutters being raised, the greetings exchanged between neighbors, the distant call to prayer from minarets in the Muslim quarter, all seem muted as if the city itself knows that something sacred approaches. In the pale pre-dawn light, shadows still cling to the ancient stones, and the air carries the cool residue of night, fragrant with jasmine and the faint smell of baking bread from the Arab bakeries near the Damascus Gate. From the direction of the four Sephardic synagogues, built in the 16th century and destroyed in 1948 only to be painstakingly restored after 1967, the first notes of prayer begin to drift through the morning air. The voices are male, carrying the distinctive melodic patterns of traditional Jewish liturgy, rising and falling in rhythms that predate the stone walls surrounding them. These are not the everyday prayers of morning service, but something more deliberate, more weighted with intention. The procession is beginning to form, and with it comes a palpable shift in the atmosphere of the quarter. The participants gather slowly, reverently. There are elderly men whose faces map decades of prayer at this wall, their white prayer shawls, talitot, draped over shoulders that have borne witness to the city's transformation from Jordanian occupation when Jews were barred from this sacred place for 19 years, to the emotional reunion of 1967 when Israeli paratroopers first reached the wall after the Six-Day War, weeping openly as they touched stones their people had been forbidden to approach. There are younger men, many in the black coats and wide-brimmed hats of various Hasidic communities, their faces intense with concentration as they prepare to walk the path their ancestors walked. Some carry Torah scrolls, wrapped in embroidered velvet mantles of deep blue and burgundy, cradled in their arms like the most precious of children. These scrolls, handwritten on parchment by scribes in a tradition unchanged for thousands of years, contain the 5 books of Moses, the foundation of Jewish law and identity. As the procession begins its slow movement toward the Western Wall Plaza, something remarkable happens throughout the Old City. Word spreads, not through electronic communication but through something more ancient, more organic, the interconnected awareness of a community for whom sacred time and space are woven into daily existence. In the Muslim quarter, where 30,000 residents live in the largest section of the Old City, shopkeepers pause in their preparations. In homes along the Via Dolorosa, where Christian pilgrims trace the path they believe Jesus walked to his crucifixion, residents move to their windows. On the rooftops of the Christian quarter, where the domes and bell towers of dozens of churches punctuate the skyline, people stop their morning routines. The procession moves through the Jewish quarter's main thoroughfare, past the Cardo, the ancient Roman marketplace whose columns still stand, a street that was old when the temple still crowned the mount above. The participants walk in a formation that speaks of both order and spontaneity, a shape that forms itself naturally from shared purpose rather than choreographed planning. At the front, several rabbis lead, their faces lifted slightly upward, their lips moving in constant prayer. Behind them, the Torah scrolls are carried high, and behind those, rows of men and boys move in a rhythm that matches the cadence of the prayers being sung. The singing grows as more voices join. It is not performance but participation, not concert but conversation with the divine. The melodies are haunting, built on modal scales that seem to contain within them the longing of exile and the joy of return, the memory of destruction and the hope of redemption. Some of the songs are psalms composed by King David 3,000 years ago, words that have been sung at this wall in various forms since at least the 10th century when historical records first clearly document Jewish devotional practices here. Out of the depths I call to you, O Lord, they sing, and if I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. As the procession descends toward the plaza, the western wall comes into view, and a collective intake of breath can be felt rather than heard. No matter how many times one has seen it, this first glimpse continues to carry impact. The wall rises, massive and serene, its stones fitted together without mortar in the Herodian fashion, each block's face slightly recessed with a fine chiseled border that catches the growing light. The wall is not uniform in its construction. The lower 7 courses are the original Herodian stones, massive and perfectly fitted. Above them, smaller stones from the Umayyad period in the 8th century, and above those, smaller still, stones from the Mamluk period in the 13th through 16th centuries. It is a vertical timeline, each layer added by different hands in different eras, yet all serving the same purpose: to hold, to support, to endure. The plaza before the wall, which did not exist in its current form until 3 days after the 1967 capture when the Moroccan quarter that had stood here for centuries was hastily demolished to create space for the Jewish crowds who rushed to this newly accessible site, is vast. Where once there was a narrow alleyway only 4 meters wide that could accommodate a maximum of 12,000 people per day, there is now an expanse of 20,000 square meters that can hold 400,000 souls. This morning the plaza is not yet full, but it is filling as word of the procession brings people from throughout the Jewish quarter and beyond. And here is where the extraordinary thing happens. As the procession reaches the plaza and begins its final approach to the wall itself, a silence begins to spread. It does not begin at the wall and move outward. Rather, it begins everywhere at once, as if the old city itself has decided to hold its tongue. In the Muslim quarter, the usual morning bustle, the vendors setting up their stalls along the covered markets that wind through the quarter, the children being called to prepare for school, the delivery trucks navigating the impossible narrow lanes, all of it softens, quiets, stills. The silence is not complete, not absolute, but it is unmistakable. It is a diminishment, a hushing, a collective decision to pause. In the Christian quarter, the bells of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which would normally be ringing the hour, remain still. Along the Christian Quarter Road, where tourists typically begin gathering even at this early hour, voices drop to whispers. In the souvenir shops and cafes, people turn toward the direction of the western wall, though they cannot see it from here, as if they can sense through stone and distance what is occurring. The Armenian Quarter, smallest and most insular of the 4 quarters, also seems to hold its breath. Behind the walls of the Armenian Patriarchate, where a community has maintained its presence for 1600 years, the morning prayers are offered in hushed tones. This cessation of noise is not organized. There has been no announcement, no request for silence. Yet it happens as natural as breathing, as inevitable as dawn. It speaks to something profound about this place, about the way that holiness, when it is genuine and deeply felt, can radiate outward, can impose itself gently on the surrounding world. Jerusalem has always been this way, a city where the spiritual dimension is not hidden behind closed doors but walks the streets, where the sacred past is not sequestered in museums but rises from the very stones beneath your feet. The procession reaches the wall, and the participants arrange themselves in the traditional manner. The plaza before the wall is divided by a barrier called the mechitza, separating men and women in accordance with Orthodox Jewish practice. The men approach the wall itself, moving forward in waves. The closer they get, the more their individual identities seem to blur into a collective expression of devotion. Some press their foreheads against the ancient stones, their hands spread flat against the surface worn smooth by centuries of touch. Others stand swaying in prayer, their bodies rocking forward and back in the distinctive motion called shuckling, a physical embodiment of the soul's longing. Still others slip small pieces of paper into the cracks between the stones, prayers written down, hopes and fears and dreams committed to paper and offered to God in this place where heaven and earth are believed to touch. The Torah scrolls that have been carried in procession are now brought directly to the wall. They are lifted high, and the men surrounding them begin to dance, a slow, turning circle of celebration and devotion. The dancing is unlike anything you might see at a wedding or celebration. There is joy in it, yes, but also something deeper, something that contains within it the awareness of millennia of exile and persecution, of temples destroyed and people scattered, and yet here now in this moment they are home. They are at the wall of their ancestors' temple, and they are free to pray. From this central core of activity, the silence ripples outward with renewed intensity. It is as if the old city's residents and visitors of all faiths and none have tacitly agreed to honor this moment. On the Temple Mount itself, which Muslims call Haram al-Sharif and which rises directly above the western wall, the usual morning activity around the dome of the Rock in Al-Aqsa Mosque continues, but even here there is a perceptible softening. Muslim worshippers entering the compound for morning prayers do so with a quiet that seems more than coincidental. The competing claims to this space, the political tensions that have boiled over into violence countless times over the decades, all of that recedes, just for these moments in the face of something more fundamental, the recognition of another's sacred moment. The light is changing as the sun rises higher. Jerusalem's unique limestone, quarried from the Judean hills that surround the city, possesses a quality unlike any other building stone. As sunlight strikes it, the stone seems to glow from within, radiating a warm honey-colored luminescence. The effect is particularly striking on the western wall, where the morning sun now reaches the upper courses, and the wall appears less like a construction of human hands than like a natural formation, a living thing. The stones, some of them weighing as much as several elephants, fitted so precisely that a knife blade cannot slip between them, catch and hold the light. In the plaza, the prayers intensify. There are prayers that are sung in unison, ancient texts set to melodies that have carried them through generations. There are prayers whispered in solitude, personal conversations with the divine, hopes spoken in voices too soft for anyone else to hear. There are prayers wept rather than spoken, tears flowing down faces and falling onto stones already stained by millennia of such tears, stones that have earned the name by which they are sometimes known in English, the Wailing Wall, though most Jews prefer not to use this term, finding it reductive, a name imposed from outside that captures only one dimension of what happens at this place. The air itself seems different here, thicker, more substantial. Scientists would say it is simply the density of human bodies in the enclosed space of the plaza, the heat rising from so many souls gathered together. But those present would describe it differently. They would speak of the Shekinah, the divine presence that is believed to have never left this place, even after the temple's destruction in 70 CE by the Romans. They would speak of how this is the closest spot on earth to the place where the Holy of Holies once stood, that innermost sanctum of the temple where, once a year on Yom Kippur, the high priest would enter alone to speak the unspeakable name of God. Throughout the Muslim quarter, the silence holds. Along the Via Dolorosa, at the Lion's Gate, in the covered souks where on any normal day the air would be filled with the calls of merchants and the haggling of customers, there is instead this remarkable quiet. It is not absolute. Jerusalem is too alive, too densely inhabited, too layered with competing sounds for that, but it is noticeable, meaningful, deliberate. Shopkeepers stand in their doorways, arms crossed, not impatiently waiting for the resumption of business but participating in their own way in this moment. Some are Muslim, some Christian, some secular, some devout, but all are Jerusalemites, and being a Jerusalemite means understanding that this city operates according to rhythms that transcend commerce and politics, rhythms set by the demands of the sacred. In the Christian quarter, a group of pilgrims who have gathered outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, waiting for it to open for the day's visiting hours, speak in whispers among themselves. They are from different countries, different traditions within Christianity, Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, but they share a sense that something important is occurring nearby. A priest, recognizable by his robes, explains in multiple languages what is happening at the Western Wall. We are witnessing, he says, an ancient people honoring an ancient covenant in an ancient place. Whatever our own faith, we can recognize the holiness of such a moment. His words are soft but carry in the stillness. Back at the wall, individual stories play out within the collective experience. There is an elderly man, bent with age, who has positioned himself at the wall and stands perfectly still, his palm flat against the stone, his eyes closed. He stands this way for so long that he appears to have merged with the wall itself, become another stone in its endless courses. His story, if it could be known, would likely contain chapters of survival and loss, of faith tested and maintained, perhaps of family members lost in the Holocaust or in Israel's multiple wars, perhaps of his own youth when this wall was inaccessible, when Jordanian soldiers stood where he now stands. But these specifics dissolve into the larger story, the collective memory that binds every Jew to this place. There is a young boy, no more than 10, who has been brought to the wall by his father. This is perhaps his first time participating in such a procession, and his face shows a mixture of awe and confusion, the natural uncertainty of a child confronting something vast and complex. His father's hand rests on his shoulder, and together they approach the wall. The father shows the boy how to touch the stones, how to pray, how to step backward when leaving the wall. You do not turn your back on such holiness, but rather retreat facing it, maintaining eye contact with the sacred as long as possible. The boy imitates these actions with careful precision, and in this imitation, a tradition passes from one generation to the next, as it has passed for 3,000 years. There are women too, though in the Orthodox tradition they pray at a separate section of the wall, screened from the men. But their devotion is no less intense, their prayers no less fervent. They press their hands and foreheads to the stones, they weep, they sing, they whisper their deepest hopes into the cracks in the wall. Some have traveled from distant countries for this moment. Some come here every day, walking from their homes in the Jewish quarter or nearby neighborhoods, returning to this place as naturally as others might visit a friend. For them, the Western Wall is not a tourist site or even primarily a historical monument. It is a living place of encounter with the divine. The sun continues its rise, and now it illuminates the entire old city. From above, if one could see from such a vantage point, the city appears as an organic whole, its four quarters distinct yet interwoven, its walls forming a rough rectangle that seems to embrace everything within. The dome of the rock, with its distinctive golden cupola, catches and reflects the sunlight brilliantly. The gray domes of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, more modest but no less significant, mark the Christian quarter's heart. The squared-off buildings of the Jewish quarter, many of them reconstructed after 1967, form a distinctive architectural pattern. And throughout, the narrow alleys and covered passages, the hidden courtyards and rooftop terraces, the layers upon layers of construction representing dozens of civilizations and thousands of years. But even from this imaginary aerial view, the silence would be perceptible in some way, visible in the absence of the usual morning movement, audible in what is not being said or done. The old city, which normally operates at a certain volume, at a certain pitch of activity, has modulated itself. It has turned down its volume, not out of obligation but out of something more like courtesy or perhaps recognition, the acknowledgement that when the sacred makes itself present, the appropriate response is to make space for it, to step back, to be quiet. This is not the first time such a thing has happened at the Western Wall, and it will not be the last. The wall has been a focal point of Jewish prayer for centuries, certainly since the 10th century when clear historical documentation begins, and likely much earlier. There were periods when Jewish access was limited or forbidden entirely. During the Byzantine period, Jews were permitted to visit only once a year, on Tisha B'Av, the day commemorating the destruction of both temples, to mourn what had been lost. During the Jordanian occupation from 1948 to 1967, Jews were completely barred, and the plaza as it now exists did not exist at all. But whenever access has been possible, Jews have come to this wall to pray, to weep, to remember, to hope. The procession at the wall continues, but it has evolved from movement to stillness, from progress to presence. The participants are no longer walking toward a destination. They have arrived, and now they are simply being here, in this place, in this moment. The Torah scrolls have been returned to their ark, the dancing has subsided, and what remains is pure prayer, individual and collective, silent and spoken, a rising chorus of devotion that seems to collect in the space between the wall and the morning sky. And still the old city remains quiet. It is now fully morning, the time when markets should be bustling, when tour groups should be beginning their daily navigations of the narrow streets, when the city's life should be at full volume. Instead there is this continued softness, this maintained hush. It cannot last forever. Life's demands are too insistent, commerce too necessary, the city's complex ecosystem of residents and visitors and daily routines too powerful to be indefinitely suspended. But for now, for these minutes that stretch into an hour, Jerusalem's old city has granted the Western Wall and those gathered there a gift, the gift of silence, of space, of recognition. In the Muslim quarters covered souks, a shopkeeper finally begins to open his store. The metal shutter rises with a rattle that sounds almost offensive in the quiet. He winces slightly at the noise, moves more slowly, more carefully. Gradually others do the same. The spell, if it was a spell, is beginning to break, but gently, reluctantly. The city is returning to itself, but it does so with a memory of the silence, with an awareness of what it chose to honor. At the wall, the crowd begins to thin as individual prayers reach their conclusions. People step backward from the stones, maintaining the tradition of not turning one's back. They return to the plaza, to the surrounding streets, to their homes and workplaces and hotels. But they carry something with them, the mark of encounter, the residue of the sacred. It is visible in their faces, in the way they move, in the silence some of them maintain even as they re-enter the normal flow of the city. The procession has ended, but its effects ripple outward, beyond the immediate participants, beyond even the boundaries of the old city. Because what happened here this morning was not merely a religious ritual, though it was certainly that. It was also a reminder of what this city is, what it has always been, a place where the human and the divine intersect, where the claims of heaven press upon the realities of earth, where three great monotheistic traditions maintain their most sacred sites within an area you could walk across in 15 minutes. Jerusalem is a city that demands something from those who live in it or visit it. The recognition that holiness is real, that devotion matters, that there are moments when the ordinary must step aside to make room for the extraordinary. The light continues to change as morning progresses toward midday. The western wall, having been in shadow during the earliest hours, is now fully illuminated. The stones seem to absorb the sunlight and transform it into something else, something that is part physical light and part spiritual illumination. Visitors who arrived after the procession ended, who missed the gathering and the silence, still feel something when they approach. The wall carries the prayers of this morning and of countless mornings before, carries the tears and hopes and fears of millions across millennia, and somehow, improbably, impossibly, the stones seem adequate to the task. By noon, the old city has returned to its usual rhythms. The Muslim quarters markets are alive with activity, vendors calling out the virtues of their spices and textiles and tourist trinkets. The Christian quarters cafes are filling with pilgrims pausing between visits to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and other sacred sites. The Armenian quarter maintains its characteristic quiet autonomy behind its walls. And in the Jewish quarter, life proceeds with its own particular character. Yeshiva students hurrying between study sessions, residents shopping at the kosher groceries, tourists photographing the picturesque stone buildings and artful reconstructions. But those who were present for the silence, who witnessed the procession or participated in the collective decision to honor it, they remember. They will speak of it to friends and family, will mark this day as different from others, will carry within them the knowledge that they were part of something larger than themselves. This is the function of such moments, of such places, to connect individual experience to collective memory, to link the present to the past and the future, to make tangible the intangible, to give voice to what is beyond words. The Western Wall will stand through this day and into the night, will stand tomorrow and next week and next year. It has stood for more than 2,000 years and shows no sign of falling. Empires have risen and fallen in its shadow. Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, Mamluk, Ottoman, British, Jordanian, Israeli. Religions have been born and have fought and have learned, sometimes, to coexist in its presence. Countless individual humans have lived their entire lives within sight of it, have been born and married and buried, have laughed and wept and hoped and feared, and through it all, the wall has stood. It is just stone, of course. Limestone quarried from the Judean hills, cut and hauled and fitted by ancient workers following ancient techniques. It is no different in its material composition from 1,000 other walls built during the same period, many of which have long since crumbled into dust. But it is also more than stone because we have made it more than stone. We have invested it with meaning, have freighted it with memory, have made it a symbol of endurance and faith and the human capacity to maintain identity across vast stretches of time and distance. The wall is what we have made it through our devotion to it, through our tears and prayers and presence. As afternoon moves toward evening, the character of the light changes once more. Jerusalem's famous golden hour begins, that time shortly before sunset when the entire city seems to be carved from amber, when even the most mundane corner becomes luminous. The western wall, catching this horizontal light, glows with particular intensity. Shadows lengthen in the plaza, and a new crowd begins to gather. Those who prefer evening prayers to morning, those who work during the day and reserve these hours for devotion, those who simply find the wall more approachable as the day cools and quiets. The silence that marked this morning does not repeat itself in the evening. Such moments are rare, emerging from a confluence of factors that cannot be predicted or manufactured. But even in the normal evening bustle, there is recognition of what occurred earlier. People speak of it, wonder at it, interpret it according to their various frameworks and faiths. Some see it as a sign of divine favor. Some see it as a reminder of what humans are capable of when we choose reverence over conflict. Some see it as a purely sociological phenomenon, interesting but explainable. The beauty is that all of these interpretations can coexist, can move through the old city's narrow streets side by side, just as the city's diverse inhabitants do. As darkness falls and the call to evening prayer sounds from the minarets, as church bells mark the hour, as the final daily prayers are offered at the Western Wall, Jerusalem settles into night. The old city's gates, which for centuries were closed at sunset and opened at sunrise, now remain open, though most of the commercial activity ceases. Lights come on in windows and courtyards, families gather for evening meals, and the city takes on the quieter, more intimate character of nighttime. But even in this quietude, there is a sense of fullness, of a day completed, of moments recognized and honored. What happened at the Western Wall this morning will become a story, will be told and retold, will perhaps be embellished or simplified in the telling, as stories always are. Some will remember it as more miraculous than it was, will claim that the silence was absolute and lasted for hours. Others will minimize it, will say it was just a coincidence, nothing remarkable. But for those who were truly present, who felt the shift in the city's atmosphere, who experienced that collective decision to honor a sacred moment, no embellishment or explanation will be necessary. They will simply know what they know, that for a brief time Jerusalem remembered what it was meant to be, a city of peace, a place where the divine presence is recognized and honored, where even amid complexity and conflict, there is still room for holiness. Before we close, if this journey through Jerusalem's ancient stones and sacred spaces has moved you, if you felt the power of witnessing humanity's deepest devotions, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you'll be among the first to experience our next exploration of the world's most spiritually significant places. Share this video with someone who needs to witness the power of reverence, who needs to see that even in our divided world, moments of collective respect and recognition are still possible. Your subscription doesn't just help this channel grow, it joins you to a community of seekers, of those who believe that understanding how others worship, how they express their deepest convictions, how they maintain traditions across millennia, is essential to understanding what it means to be human. Click subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together through the sacred spaces that have shaped human civilization and continue to shape human hearts.